Anecdotes for success. Level up with truth, meaning, trade-offs, perspective.
Ooh, busy week, Matt, but we promise to stay consistent. It's Sunday afternoon. Usually we have our episode uploaded by now, but hey, we're here doing it. We got a good one. You ready?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Been. I know you've been busy. I've been busy too, but no excuses, right?
No, and we had a couple small windows we could have fitted in, but we just decided Sunday it's a typical April rainy Northeast day. So
I know after 80 degrees last week or whatever it was, now it's like 40 and rainy and damp and bone chilling and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah,
bone,
Northeast.
bone chilling. I forgot how bone chilling the outdoors is until these first couple games I've coached in softball.
I was gonna say the same thing. You must really get a feel for it. Some of those wet, damp games coaching, right? There's nowhere to hide.
No, and I don't care. You're not like climbing a mountain or you're working a power line. And I don't mean it's the same thing at all, but the point is I'm not wearing that type of clothing. You have a pullover on, you have some Under Armour, you have some wind pants, but you don't have Carhartt on coaching.
Right.
And then the girls' bats and the hands and just the
Yeah.
mental focus. It's part of it. So. But yeah, it's crazy. But our episode, we were texting and we were going back and forth like we do a lot, and we're like, this could be an episode. So we're going to talk about coaches and entrepreneurs today. And
Yeah.
I just looked at the last the last text that I sent you. It was basically it's kind of interesting. I feel like in America, the average person uh would idolize a coach more than an entrepreneur. And it's kind of ironic. Coaches don't put nearly the risk into what they're doing like an entrepreneur does financially. Do you want to say anything before I move on?
No, I
Am
mean,
am I on the right track when I say
well,
that?
I mean, they're obviously different things in many ways, right? As I've tried to think through this, I mean, and these are two things that we're both passionate about, right? Which is why we're talking about them. You know, the the entrepreneur has unlimited upside. That's the point of an entrepreneur, right? Not the point of it, but that's one of the benefits. It's definitely not the point. Point is to solve a problem that needs to be solved and deliver value that has more value than what it costs to exchange it. And if you do that for enough people, think think the iPhone, think McDonald's, think a lot of things. You do that for enough people, and the entrepreneur who created it and their team or partners or whatever it happens to be, they can make unbelievable amounts of wealth that way because they're creating unbelievable amounts of value. And that's the thing that always gets not always, but gets lost on people sometimes. I hear this, well, they're not worth whatever. And it's like, well, it's not for any of us to decide who's worth what. What's the market say? It's not a question of whether that human being is worth more than another human being. I've never heard anybody make an argument that one human being is worth more than another other human being. It's a silly argument, in my opinion. It totally loses focus on what it's really about. People who want to get in that, well, and I'm getting a little off track, and I realize that, but that's the nature of these things.
I'm not stopping you.
This idea that, well, they're not worth it, or no one. It's like, no, we're talking about different things. It's how much value. My mom, I remember, was famously said about, I think it was Tiger Woods. He just got signed a contract from Nike for however tens of millions of dollars. This is years ago, and her saying, well, nobody's worth that much. And I'm saying, yeah, mom, he really is. He's probably worth way, way more because he delivers a certain amount of value to that brand that sells these products to people, and the profit far exceeds whatever he's been paid, or else they wouldn't have done it. Or they made a bad deal and then they're gonna have to regret it and fix it or go bankrupt or whatever the consequences of business are. But entrepreneurs have upside. Whereas, a coaching position obviously is much more, this is what you're going to make. Now, there's obviously coaches who make million. I mean, I don't know what Nick Saban makes. I don't know what, some of the NFL coaches or NBA or, top coaches, but figurative, I mean, realistically speaking, those are, the, they're the small percentage. There's many, many, many more coaches out there who are making a lot less, right? And we could get into the reasons behind that as well, which would be an interesting conversation. All coming back to the market and value and demand, but at the end of the day, a coach has less upside, but more stability, right?
Oh yeah, I was writing it down. I wasn't ignoring you. More. I,
So, but they're also, arguably both leaders, although not all entrepreneurs are. Not all entrepreneurs are leaders. Some entrepreneurs are terrible in that category. Being a successful entrepreneur does not require you to be a great leader always. You can be, and I'm sure there's probably the majority would be, maybe not, I don't know. But yeah, go
well,
ahead.
I'm gonna stop you there because we're gonna come
Yeah.
back to that in 1 minute. When you talk about entrepreneurs not being worth their value, and then you gave Nike and Tiger Woods example, I would challenge anybody to read Phil Knight's documentary Shoe Dog and the years and the grind and what he went through to build that
Awesome.
company. It's worth every penny. I mean, he's worth every penny for what he created.
Yeah.
He wasn't just given it, you know.
It's a great story, right? And that movie's coming out, right? Or is it out? It's not Shoe Dog the movie, but it's the Michael Jordan Air. It's called Air, I think.
Okay.
But it's about how getting Jordan into the brand changed the brand, which is, as you know, by reading the book Shoe Dog, which I read because you read it and told me to read it, and it was fantastic. That piece is only a snippet of it, right?
Yeah, it's a phenomenal story. And
Yeah.
I love the example, unlimited upside with an entrepreneur, but no guarantees, right? Coaches have limited upside for the most part, but more stability. I'd like to go a step further. A lot of coaches, especially in high school, are educators, right? And we have the time. I mean, look when a school day gets over. So,
Sure.
you're trading time value, not for what you make. But that being said, that was a great intro. I want to go back to common themes because when you started saying leaders and you say, well, not all entrepreneurs are leaders, not all coaches are leaders either. They can be tyrants. They can be tyrants or narcissists too. I mean, just like an entrepreneur. So let's talk about the common positive themes that relate coaches and entrepreneurs. You said leaders. I'll say motivators.
Okay.
I mean, you have to motivate. A good leader is going to motivate their employees.
Yeah, I would agree. I think off the cuff anyway, I think an entrepreneur is, to be successful, they're generally super passionate, right? They're super passionate about that product or service that they're bringing to the marketplace, and to the point of being obsessed. They're obsessive over it, and I can relate. I've been that way. I've been the way for out of a handful of things or a few things in my life. And obsessive is the only right word that I've ever heard or come up with. And I've heard other entrepreneurs use it. And I'm like, yes, I know what you're talking about. A lot of most people, Paul, in my opinion, sadly, will never be so obsessed about something in their life that they will think about it nonstop. They will wake up thinking about it. They will go to sleep thinking about it. Some people might hear that and go, "Oh my God, that sounds horrible," and I can see why they would think that. I don't think that way. I think it's amazing, and it comes with sacrifice, like everything does. But coaches probably can be obsessive, right? About whether it's wins and losses or really what I mean. I think of you in this way, like what you're trying to accomplish with the kids themselves, with the individuals or the team in general. And it's not just about how big the number is under W's and how small it is under the L.
When you said obsessed, I wrote it down and I was thinking about a couple times. Well, since I took the varsity softball job in February, I've almost thought about it more than my real job. I shouldn't say that publicly. Uh, and even my financial business and everything else,
Yeah.
because if you have that personality that you obsess over things, another task is dangerous if you start obsessing over too much. And it's been a hard balance
Yeah.
that I've figured out. But the obsession part's right. I'm sure as an entrepreneur, you're obsessed over the process, right? You're obsessed over getting it right. You're obsessed over growing. You're obsessed over who and what you're influencing. So there's a lot of similarities there. You know, am I going to stay strong to my process when I have kids struggling, parents arguing, and the
Mm,
results aren't there?
yeah.
You have to obsess over what you're doing is the right thing to do. Of course you make adjustments. I don't mean that, but is your process right? And when you have ups and downs, heck, with the economy or wages or employee struggles or just downturns in the market, you have to obsess with your process, right?
Yeah, you do. Yes, yes, in a lot of ways. But one of the things that I think is a bad analogy sometimes is sports versus business. And I'll tell you why I think it's a bad analogy. Because, and when I say sports, Paul, I'm talking major league, NBA. I'm talking like when we think of sports, we think of the Super Bowl and our team, or the NCAA football or the Final Four or something like that. That's a different animal than high school sports, in my opinion, and for significant reasons. It's not talent; it's got nothing to do with that, in my opinion. But at the highest level of sports, it's zero sum, right? It's win or lose. You are either the champion or you're one of the teams that didn't win. You're one of the losing teams. I don't mean losers in terms of that
Right.
word incapable. I mean you either won or you didn't win, right? But that is not the case in business at all. And
No.
that's why I think it's such a bad analogy. There's so many people come at business with it's me against my competitors, it's me against everyone else. And that brings a certain amount of obsession with it itself, and probably has led a lot of people to some great success as business people, because they kind of get this chip on their shoulder. It's me against the world. And I can relate. I've had a little of that. But at the end of the day, my competitor doesn't have to lose for me to be very successful in business, right? I don't have to destroy my competitors for me to win. And in many ways, I don't even pay attention to my competitors. In many ways, I pay attention to my processes. I pay kind of like what you're talking about. I pay attention to my operations, what we are doing, and what we can control. I don't know. I don't think that my sales and my profits and my wins as as an entrepreneur, I can't tell whether those are better or worse based on how my competitors are doing. I have no idea. I don't
Right.
think they're aligned. But if you go to the NFL, you either won the Super Bowl or you didn't. And you weren't, and every team sets out to be the champion. You don't have to do that in business. Maybe you want to own market share. Maybe you want to, there are some industries, tech comes to mind,
Right.
where it's us against them. I would argue that's not necessarily even true either. I mean, Twitter can exist with Facebook, with TikTok.
Real quick, I think
Yeah.
beverage companies out, Coke versus Pepsi, they always act like one's greater than the other, but they actually both grow exponentially together. Like they create that narrative of who's better, but it doesn't even matter to them. I mean, I know one's a much bigger company than the other, but I was just wanting to interrupt when you were saying that.
It's a perfect example. Thank you. It's perfect. It's like both are growing and doing great. When General Motors is doing great, it doesn't necessarily mean Ford is terrible, right? So, but if when the Patriots were winning every Super Bowl, it felt like for 2 decades, no one else was winning, right? There was no one else had a parade. No one else was on the cover of the magazines or or whatever, the blogs or whatever was happening back then.
So we might have found our answer. We started out saying, I think, and coaches and entrepreneurs have so much in common. I'm not talking the financial gains versus the meaning and time, but they can be leaders, they can motivate, they can be obsessed, they have a purpose. Well, they have our 4 pillars too. But the question I wanted to try to tackle was, why doesn't society seem to glorify an entrepreneur like they do a coach? And I think because to the average fan sitting back watching, they love sports, they love underdog stories, but they associate with someone having to win the zero-sum game. So all of a sudden, if an entrepreneur comes into the picture, they feel, which you made me think of this idea when you were talking, the business has to win. And they don't win by defeating other businesses. They win by having great processes and solving problems and delivering value. But people don't know any better. So they don't put the entrepreneur on the same pedestal as a coach. A coach is going to be much more highly thought of than even Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, because people think they're so evil because they're not worth what they're getting paid, right? Did I ramble too much? But they're not winning necessarily because everybody else is losing. They're making everybody's life better, just like a coach.
They are exactly. They are exactly. There's not a certain amount of money that's out there, and when Jeff Bezos makes another $1 billion, Matt and Paul didn't. There goes $1 billion Matt and Paul couldn't have made. There's a very shallow mindset, and it's understandable in a way, but people, we need to. This is the reason why it's worth talking about. One of the reasons, because then it's something people can understand, is there isn't just an X amount of a binary amount of money out there that if Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or anybody else gets it, then nobody else can get it. That's not how money is created. That's not how capital is created. And that's a fun discussion too. But so if someone gets it, if Paul, you make $1,000 more this week, it's not like there's $1,000 gone from the marketplace that nobody else can get their hands on. It's so people have this mindset, and going back to the entrepreneurship coach thing, think it's easy to look at a coach and go, well, look at this person. He or she is sacrificing, creating lessons, giving, teaching, educating, all these positive things for other people that they're providing. Whereas entrepreneurs obviously over here are just greedy and they're trying to make as much money as they can, and they don't care about anybody else, and et cetera, et cetera. And are there people like that? Of course there are. Just like there are bad coaches.
There's bad narcissistic tyrant coaches too, that are just in it for the power and the glory of themselves. I mean, so we're not going to focus on either side of that, coaches or entrepreneur.
Right, exactly. So I think that there's very few examples out there of entrepreneurs that have created. Microsoft's a great example. I just heard this recently. Microsoft's an old company now, but it's really not. When Microsoft went public, Paul, and it was created by Bill Gates and Steve, Wozniak, I think is how you pronounce it, in a garage, and that's. I
think they went to high school together.
I believe you're right.
That's insane.
And then dropped out of college to start this business, created one of the most successful businesses in the world. And we know that Bill Gates is one of the wealthiest people in the world. And if you know who Steve Wozniak is, who I think passed away, I could be wrong on that, but he was obviously very wealthy as well, a billionaire, multi-billionaire. We could have our fact checker get us on that one too. But I'm him passing away or not. But the point is, those are great stories to tell, and we can demonize those two for being the multi-billionaires who took all the money but you know how many millionaires they created when they went public? I read 12,000 people became millionaires when they went public. 12,000 essentially, Paul, employees, people who had people had gone to work for them who exchanged stock options for salary or whatever happened to be. I don't know all the ins and outs, but the point was these 12,000 people weren't all founders, right? They weren't the ones staying up until 3 in the morning probably for years at a time working on whatever computer stuff that is that I don't even comprehend. They weren't. I'm sure they were a big part of the process, and they got their value for it in the end. They took their chance by taking the stock options. Good for them. I applaud them. It's wonderful. Talk about the American dream in another way. But who created without Jobs and Wozniak? There's no 12,000 millionaires to be created out of that. And again, did that money now get taken out off the table, if you will, and now nobody else is able to be able to get that money or have that wealth because they took it? No, the value was created by an idea, by people putting it together, building this business, going public, and then millions and millions of people around the world going, I want to buy a piece of that business, created all this additional wealth. And now you've got all these multimillionaires, billionaires out there. So it's so simple to get caught up into this evil of the wealth thing. And I don't think it's generally well thought out. I think it's very reactionary. It's very, we're jealous of people who have more than us. And it's biological, Paul. It's like,
yeah, it really is.
Right.
So basically, when we say coaches versus entrepreneurs, same type personality, different societal perspective.
Yeah. I mean, definitely different societal perspective in a lot of ways, and I think entrepreneurs.
There's a lot that understand and look up to entrepreneurs, but I'm talking average societal, 9 to 5 person.
Yeah. No, I think there's some truth to that, and I will say this: being an entrepreneur is a lot of work, and there's a lot more who don't make it than do, that's I don't think most go in it, Paul, out of sheer greed and desire to rule the world.
No, but just recently taking the coaching job I took, people are like, why do you want to put yourself through that? It's the same type situation. You're dealing with problems all day. People here's one thing maybe that happens to you as an entrepreneur. As a coach, every time I make a decision that doesn't go right, people can second guess me, right?
It's very public.
Just like any decision you could make with anything you own. And I had someone tell me this a long time ago when I second guessed a coach's decision, a friend of mine. And he goes, well, you got to understand, when I made the decision, it was all implied that it would work. That's why I made that decision. So when it didn't work, now I have to adjust and move on or hold myself accountable or live with the result. The person watching can just say, I wouldn't have done that.
Right.
And you probably would have if you were in that situation. Or at another point in the contest or game or the ownership of a business, you're going to make a decision that someone with no skin in the game or business can second guess you because they would have done it differently, right?
Sure.
And to me, that's kind of the fun of being a coach. And I mean, of course, I'm an entrepreneur on a small scale in relation to you. I'm not ever trying to say we're equal because we're not in those regards. But you, it's kind of the fun part of doing what you do, right? Knowing not every decision's going to be right, but you made the decision, you're moving on, you're adjusting, you're adapting, and you're going to win more than you lose.
Yeah, and don't you think whether we're talking entrepreneurial or coaching, in some ways the coaching is even more, I make a decision, I kind of know, and I have to deal with it. But there's not a lot of people questioning it or because they don't have, but boy, you got players, you got other coaches, you've got parents, you've got their siblings, you got just general people are interested because they're alum or whatever. You got a lot more Monday morning quarterbacks as a coach, I'd say, in many ways, and the decisions are much more kind of in public, in the moment, on the spot, and then due to be capable of being criticized. Now, you might make in a game you might make 200 decisions that have some sort of potential impact that other people would visibly see. But you might make two that don't go the right way. And those are the only two anyone's going to know, right? They're the only two anyone's going to talk about because they, of course, would have made it differently because it didn't work out, not because they would have beforehand.
Right. Well, I think about that. I try super hard not to take anything personally in teaching or coaching because a lot of decisions I make do affect people emotionally on a super high level, right?
Mm.
And there's going to be some feedback, positive or negative, when you do that. And we can have conversations the next day or 24 hours, and you can still not agree with me, but you have to understand the process, right? The pattern that I was following. And usually it works out in the long run. Time helps too.
Yeah, but again, I'm just thinking this through as some degree. It's like, when you're making a decision, a coaching decision, you're making it against another coach who's theoretically who's making another their own decision, right? So
like it's like a chess match, kind of.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Whereas you're not doing that in business all the time, right? If I'm making a decision to bring out a new product or change the way we service people, I'm not doing it while there's another person across the street trying to make a decision that's going to disrupt my decision, right? Whereas you're making a decision, let's say you're going to send, well, we'll use softball, baseball analogy. You're going to send your runner to steal a base. Maybe that other coach is making a decision to pitch out, right? That decision is directly to try to impact and defeat, if you will, because you're in a zero-sum environment, your decision. I'm gonna have my quarterback throw a long pass, a bomb, but you're the defensive coordinator on the other sideline, and you're making a decision to blitz me so that I don't have enough time to make that long pass, right? There's this chess game that you mentioned going on, whereas in business, there is some of that, again, I think more dependent on the environment. But if, let's say, I own real estate, which I do, my decisions on how to run my real estate better, I don't have another real estate owner of real estate trying to make decisions that's going to hurt my real estate, right? We're not making these impactful zero-sum kind of decisions.
I'm trying to sell this house. Oh, I'm going to spray graffiti on it the night before and decline the value of it. Man, I didn't see that coming. Why'd you let him do that?
Exactly.
But yeah, it's coach versus coach. Then it's a matter of players executing versus players trying to execute.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it's fair to say that good coaches and good entrepreneurs are leaders, motivators, are obsessed, and they feel they have skin in the game. I'll just add that one. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know what problem we really solved, but we had a good conversation.
Yeah, I don't know if we solved one. I mean, we may in some ways, I think it's valuable to look at these things in a very objective way possible. And some of what we talked about today speaks to the subjectivity and emotional way people will talk about things, whether it's coaches, whether it's sports, whether it's business, whether it's money. And there's these tendencies to lie to ourselves about what we're really doing in some of these areas and why we're really so, there's a tendency a lot of times to get angry when someone and jealous when someone has more resources than we do. We use the word money in our society a lot of times, but I think that's the wrong word. I think it's resources because and then we pretend it's not because they have more. It's because it's just not fair to other people. Other people aren't getting their fair share. It's never me who wants more, right? I'll complain about it, but it's not because I want something that I didn't earn. It's because other people aren't getting it. It's because you took it from them, and it's not fair. And I'm here. I'm the moral and good person. I'm gonna help take it from the bad people who have too much and spread it to the people who deserve more of it. And I'm not even saying there's not a place for some of that in some ways, but I don't even think that's the reasoning for most people. I think most people are envious of that like myself could be, I could place myself in that category. There's tons of people with more resources than I have, tons. Well, it's easy to get envious of that, right? And but why are you doing it, Paul? Is it because really is it am I doing that because I'm really just such a good moral person? I'm trying to make things better for everyone? Or is it I want to be I want to be ultimately looked at biologically as a better option, right?
Yeah,
And
no, go ahead.
no,
I
that would so is that and I use the word biologically very intentionally. It's like inherent in us. It's so I it makes sense. I understand why that people can be like that. What I think is important is to understand it and then really look internally. And I'm just using this as an example about looking at ourselves internally, and I have to do it too. I'm guilty. I'm sure I'm blind in a lot of areas. Why am I really doing and saying what I'm saying? Is it really because what is coming out of my mouth, or is there something else going
Well, it costs nothing to judge, right?
on?
And you lose nothing, but you have everything to gain if you're right, or if you think your narrative's right and you get a following. Action has trade-offs, whether it's time or some sort of resource, and people don't want to do that. And that's fine. So people that judge, that costs them nothing, maybe they have something to gain or lose, like mentally. I'll listen to them, and then in about 3 seconds, I determine if, oh, that's a pretty good perspective that might help me be better. Or I say, well, they're not even in the game, so who cares?
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop them, right? There's a very powerful side of society that loves to judge, costs nothing, and they, for some reason, that's what they put their energy into. Now, it must be biological because people like me and you are never going to understand it.
No, well, it can be difficult to understand in some ways, but there's also that side on the sports aspect too, where we're just going to judge the coach or the player or whatever, and we would have done it differently, and we would have done it, we would have done it better, and I know I'm guilty.
No, we do that. We do that if I'm watching my kids or if I'm watching a game on TV. But I know what I do. It's like, hey, I'll joke with my friends. I'm like, I don't understand it. Like I'm watching the Steelers lose. Mike Tomlin's not returning my phone calls. I don't understand why. So I always say a statement like that just to remind myself that it really doesn't matter what I think. But it's even like it's human nature to just
It is.
not have any skin in something and watch it and be a fan. I guess that's why it's short for fanatic. So I don't know. Hey, it was good. It was good today. So
Yeah,
we'll
good
see you
deal.
next. We'll see you next week, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, don't judge me, Matt.